Danmachi, Out of Orion's DVD was recently released, and having started to watch Danmachi after it came out in cinemas, I decided to buy it. The film itself is set between the events of the first and second season, so characters such as Mikoto are not significantly featured in it, since they had not yet fully joined the Hestia Familia. Since it is an anime-only feature, the film itself is completely meaningless to the future story, and has zero stakes to it, similar to any other anime-exclusive films. However, this does not mean it cannot be an enjoyable ride if the story is good. I mean, the original Brody film was non-canonical, yet that was an extremely enjoyable film. However, in this case, it is certainly most not. A rough summary of the plot of the film is that Artemis and her familia fought against a monster who killed them all. But, before she was killed, Artemis used her power to summon down a spear from heaven to help her, which is very picky about its user. So, with the part of her essence that she had inside the spear, she enlists Hermes to devise a way to find such a person to use it. He creates a sword in the stone type of event in Orion. Belle pulls it out, and then him and the Hestia Familia go on a quest to kill the beast and avenge Artemis's familia. The movie ends with Belle killing the monster and Artemis, who was trapped inside it. So why is it terrible? To start us off, the presence of many of the characters in the movie come off as completely pointless. I mean, apart from fan service, what is the point of Ryu being there, especially when the Hermes Familia is there already doing the same job? The only characters that seem to have any development during the plot of the film are Hestia, Belle and Artemis. Wolf and Lily just seemingly mope around for the entire of the film, making one-off lines here and there. Characters such as Otta and Frere do make one-off appearances to show that they do indeed exist, even if it's only to comment on the generic Doomsday Countdown and how Frere can do nothing about it. The film also comes off as having a padded runtime, as the long travel scenes combined with the dungeon subplot come off as just an easy way to increase the runtime rather than an interesting plot point. As if the monsters in the dungeon really wanted to escape, they'd have just sent out the extremely high level monsters out first, thus killing the adventurers guarding the dungeon and enabling their escape to the surface. The entire dungeon subplot just reeks of the studio trying to pad the runtime rather than actually introducing something new and exciting to the film. While we are talking about monsters, let us talk about the big bad monster in the movie called Antari. It's a scorpion that can create more scorpions, regenerate and devour gods and other powerful beings to gain their strength. So, my main problem is this. How could Artemis be devoured by a monster? No, seriously, we see later on in Season 2 that gods get dragged up to heaven when they suffer mortal wounds. So why didn't Artemis get dragged up to heaven immediately after being eaten, as she must have received some sort of wound or damage before being devoured? And if Artemis was able to summon Orion to defeat Antari before she was eaten, why didn't she just use her massive godlike powers to destroy the monster and just be expelled back to heaven? Her familia were apparently still alive back then as she saw them die one by one. So why did she let them die if she could have prevented that? Secondly, using god tier powers in the mortal realm apparently causes expulsion back to heaven. So when Antari used Artemis's lunar bow, surely it would have been banished from the mortal plane. I don't buy the reason they give in the film that this somehow unknown monster has the power to bind her to the world over the power that defines the god's very own existence. Also, why did Antari not eat her familiar after killing them? I mean, it ate Artemis to gain her power. Surely her powerful familiar members would increase its strength further. Why bother leaving them on the ground to rot? Furthermore, earlier in the film we see that Antari drains the life and sustenance out of life forms. So why didn't it drain the remains of her familia, leaving them as hollowed out corpses rather than the perfectly preserved bodies we find them as? And why does the monster even attack Orario? Wouldn't it want to focus all of its power on crushing the opponents in front of it, rather than waste energy attacking somewhere far away? And to top it all off, if it was going to attack Orario, why did Antari wait until it was under attack to do so? Why not immediately strike at it between the absorption of Artemis and the numerous days before Belle arrived to fight it? The fact that there are all these plot holes makes the story come off as lazy, as if they cannot think of any way to get rid of Artemis and give a reason to why the rest of Orario would care about the fighting occurring far away from them. It's as if the studio had no faith in the audience caring enough about Artemis to warrant a more focused plot on her. To compound this, the actual fights themselves are not enjoyable, as all the fights either end in 5 seconds and have zero weight to them, or are dragged out in incredibly long, boring boss distraction missions, where the movie dumps hours worth of exposition in the fights before suddenly ending it in one swift attack. The fights all come off as shallow attempts to give the story more meaning, similar to the low quality bread in a cheap sandwich that is used to hold the meat and salad together. The monsters themselves are also shown to be of low quality, with their CGI standing out against the well animated characters and backgrounds, immediately ruining any sort of engagement you have in the story. All these questions pale in comparison to the finale of the film when you ask, why does Bel kill Artemis? We see him destroy the monster using Argonaut and Arrow of the Orion. So, with the monster dead, why does he not just cut Artemis out of the monster? We see her cry when he kills her, so she must still be alive. And there are other swordsmen and gods nearby that could surely help in that regard. I mean, why is Ryu even there if not for this exclusive purpose? So why does he have to kill her? As it is seemingly creating tragedy for no plot reason apart from one. And that is Artemis is not a light novel character. So has to die, otherwise she'd impact the future plot, and that could not be allowed to happen. The other marketing reason why Artemis was killed off was due to when the film was released in Japan. In Japan, the film was released on the 15th of February, or Valentine's Day. To sell the film, they made the relationship between Bel and Artemis as romantically linked as possible, as again, they could not make romantic strides in an anime-only movie between any of the members of the main cast. What this meant is to make the love interest go away, she had to die. At the end of the film, Artemis states that in 10,000 years they'll be reincarnated and be together again and enjoy a 10,000-year romance. Which, on the surface, is an upbeat message for the movie to end on, yet it kind of undermines the whole premise of the series to begin with, as Bel is now seemingly attached to Artemis in the long term, rather than him picking up any girls in a dungeon. It also makes all of his relationships now feel less important, as he's seemingly inextricably attached to Artemis. Overall, Arrow of the Orion is a terrible one-off anime film, as it has confusing elements about how gods die or are reincarnated, whether they can use their heavenly powers on Earth without any repercussions, and whether the rest of the series is technically pointless since he's already permanently bonded with Artemis, even if it is in 10,000 years' time. That being said, this is a couples film, so perhaps being the jaded single person I am, I did not connect with it because of that. Even then, it does not excuse the poor CGI and padded runtime, which is why I personally rate Arrow of Orion as a terrible movie.